This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. Well, my guests today, Bruce E.G. Smith and Nancy and Leon Zionts, jointly lead Front Porch Theatricals, Pittsburgh's boutique professional musical theater company. Front Porch prides itself on presenting socially relevant musicals featuring Pittsburgh-based talent. Focusing on both established and emerging local talent, Front Porch creates a high-level professional vehicle for directors, designers, and artists. And the company focuses on its commitment to mentoring young talent through its very hands-on apprentice and internship programs. Originally formed by Bruce, who is by day a businessman, and Leon, an attorney and actor, Front Porch mounted its premiere production of Only Me, which is a Pittsburgh-created musical written by Doris Esteban, Marjorie Stewart, and David Michael Ed, at the Kelly Strayhorn Theater in 2009. Despite being their inaugural production, Only Me achieved both artistic and financial success, thereby motivating Bruce and Leon to continue producing musicals and to refine the company's mission. Emboldened by their success, Leon and Bruce then produced Next to Normal in 2012 and In the Heights in 2013 in collaboration with Carnival Theatrics. Also in 2013, Bruce and Leon were joined by Leon's wife Nancy, who grew up in the Yiddish Theater of Canada. Together, these three have gone on to mount highly acclaimed musical productions of Parade, The Last 5 Years, The Light in the Piazza, The Spitfire Grill, Floyd Collins, Violet, Big Fish, A New Brain, and Grey Gardens, which featured a brilliantly memorable performance by one of our really, truly great StoryBeat guests, Dana Michelle Griffith. I've seen a significant number of Front Porch Theatricals productions and will tell anyone who will listen how brilliant each show has been. That said, for the record, I recently joined the Front Porch Theatricals Board of Directors, and so I'm really quite excited to be involved in the company's future. And it's a great joy, therefore, for me to welcome the triple producing threat of Nancy Zionts, Leon Zionts, and Bruce Smith to StoryBeat today. Welcome to you all.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. That's a great intro.
Well, thank you. You guys have done great stuff, so it's a deserved intro. So where does the name Front Porch Theatricals come from?
Well, I guess that's my cue,
Yep.
because it actually began a number of years ago in Swickley. My kids were growing up in a big old Georgian house in Swickley, and there was a huge front porch that afforded them the opportunity to bring in friends from the neighborhood and put on little plays and check out accents and things like that they enjoyed to do. Later on, they became professional actors, and my daughter did 5 national tours, and my son is currently on the Hamilton tour.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
I got to see him here in Pittsburgh several weeks ago. Just fantastic.
Yeah.
He stole the show, really.
Well, that part is fabulous.
It is fabulous.
Yeah,
He plays
great.
the king.
Right, exactly. So when it became evident that we had this company, I went to my daughter, or she came to me and said, "Dad, you really ought to name it Front Porch because of all the theatrics that were on our front
Makes
porch."
sense.
And so that's how the name was born.
And so that was kind of simple. But,
Yeah.
but nobody would really know that unless they read it in the program or you told them.
True. Or close friends that happen to know.
I think there are a lot of theater companies that have oddball names like that come from somewhere personal thing, right?
Sure.
Okay, so I know that both Leon and Nancy have performance backgrounds. I'll stick with Bruce for just one more second and just wonder, how did all this, Front Porch Theatricals, how did you get attracted to all this? Because you have no musical or theater background.
Well, I do have musical background. I was a guitar player in the 60s in a rock band, and we made an album and all that, and I still play guitar from time to time.
Wasn't known as the Beatles, was it?
No, but we did a lot of Beatle numbers because it was back in the 60s. So, yes, I do have a musical background, but it was really my kids, Amy and Peter, that sort of vicariously got me involved in theater because I kept watching all of their shows, week after week, month after month in high school. And then, of course,
I always wonder how someone like Bruce gets involved in becoming a producer of shows when you don't really have an actual theatrical history.
Well, I was on the board of Pittsburgh Musical Theater,
sure.
and that's actually how I got to meet Leon. He and I were executives on the board there for a number of years. And I had a neighbor that actually approached me and said, look, your kids are in theater. You also are on a board of a musical theater company. Maybe you could produce this musical that I wrote.
So this was the light bulb that started to go on.
Yeah, and I went, well, I don't know anything about producing theater. I mean, I have some interest in it, certainly, and I have a little bit of background. So I contacted Leon because I said, Leon, you got to help me, man, because I don't really know much about this, but maybe together we can figure it out.
And Leon immediately said yes.
And I did, and we did.
I imagine so.
It took us a short while to figure it out, and we were back in the day we were extremely risk averse, and so we weren't going to put our mission was not to put our money in the show.
Okay, so I just joined the board. Are you telling me you're now risk happy?
We're more knowledgeable. We're more knowledgeable about risk and about accepting this thing.
I feel a lot better now.
But back in the day, we were not a 501c3. We learned enough to affiliate with a fiscal sponsor so that we could raise tax donated money, and we raised enough so that we figured if we sell merely 50 seats a night for a 5-night run at the Kelly Strayhorn, we'll cover our nut. And we sold 150 seats a night. We had a wonderfully successful artistic and financial success, and it was great. And it was the beginning, although it took us a couple years to produce again after that.
Well, you had to figure out what you were doing. It was at that time a one-off, right?
Yeah, it was intended to be a one-off.
We actually thought it was a one-off. We didn't really expect it to continue.
So there was no plan in the beginning. It just evolved.
No, not really. And but I started working with a theater company called Carnival Theatrics, and they were doing Ragtime, and the following year they did Into
the Woods.
Into the Woods.
Were you in the show?
I was in both of those shows, but I was telling these young men who were Justin Fortunato and Bobby Newmeyer, who were selling plasma and building the sets and going to work and going to school and then coming to rehearsal. I said, Bruce and I have produced something. We know what we're doing. We could help you. And it took us 2 years. I said, quit borrowing money from your parents, quit selling plasma, and let us help you reach a fiscal sponsor and raise money and do it right. We'll be the grown-ups in the room.
For the listeners out there, I just want to be clear that the only way you can do theater is to sell plasma.
No, you do not need to sell plasma.
Or your soul.
Yeah, you could sell ads.
Oh, you
ads
could.
are good.
You definitely sell your soul.
No.
But after 2 years of doing shows with these young men, very talented, Bruce and I decided we could do it on our own, and with more control, more fiscal control.
So I don't know if it shows. I think it probably does. I'm kidding, of course. But you may be able to tell, the listeners may be able to tell, Leon can sing. Leon's got an awesome, mellifluous, sonorous voice.
Thank you.
And he can sing his butt off, because I've heard it many times. And so you can just tell by listening to you speak how you are able to sing. I'm curious, Nancy, tell us a little bit about your background in the Yiddish theater.
I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and Yiddish theater was it was very successful, still is very successful in that community. And I was 5 years old, and we used to rehearse every week in a library. And
always in Yiddish, pure Yiddish.
Pure Yiddish, it still is. Although now they do some of the shows in English, or they do them with what do you call one of the words?
The super titles.
Super titles. They do that now. But I performed with them in children's shows, and then in the children in the adult shows, and then joined the touring company and spent my summers with them at all of the camps in the Laurentians and the Catskills and the Fishkills.
These were dramas, comedies, musicals, was
yes.
everything?
Yes.
It was all of the above.
All of the above.
And was there a repertoire?
It was a family. So my history of theater was family. So it is a rep theater, and not everybody was in every show every season. But if you were a member of the Yiddish Theater of Canada, you are still in your heart a member of the Yiddish Theater of Canada. I still am in the Facebook group.
Well, isn't it interesting that you have not gone off at any point and just independently done this? You've become a family again.
Correct. So it's the spirit of theater that I love so much, not necessarily the performing myself. I am not as interested in being front and center on stage as Leon is. I don't have a voice like his.
Who does?
Who does? Really? He sang to me on our first date, and the rest is history.
Robert Goulet, maybe. So, do you ever go back to Canada and see shows? You do.
I do indeed, and I still do keep in touch with a number of people who are in the Yiddish Theater, and Hershey Felder, who was in town this past December, was a member also of the Yiddish Theater of Canada. He's a little younger than I am, but he was a member of the theater there as well, and he's gone on to do incredible shows.
His show here was phenomenal.
The Irving Berlin show
was amazing.
Just absolutely incredible, and his other shows I hear are equally good. So.
I'm sure they are. I mean, you can just tell he really knows how to put something like that together big time. Really well. Okay, so for all three of you, because now that we've gotten a little bit of the intro out of the way, what is it about musicals in general that attracts you? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to produce musicals of all things?
Well, because you gave me that great compliment, I'll start. I've been singing my entire life, and in 8th grade, I managed to get on stage in a talent show in junior high school, and really have wanted to be on stage continuously since.
Mm-hmm. You got that bug. Once that bug got in your blood, that's it.
Yeah, I never really. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and that's a good vocation, but it doesn't give one the same joy and excitement as performing.
Lawyering is not your heart and passion. Theater is.
As long as my partners aren't listening to this, yes.
I didn't say you
not
wouldn't
these partners, his day partners.
I didn't say you wouldn't give 110% to your day job.
Yeah.
But your desire throughout the day is probably to go off and do theater.
But musicals, and I'm sure I can speak for all of us because we talk about musicals a lot. We like meaningful musicals. We like socially relevant musicals.
Well, we'll talk about that.
People,
for sure.
People who are needing a sentiment can find one in a musical. A lot of really, really gifted authors and composers have written all the sentiments that we're dying to say, but we can't figure out how to. And so I find that musicals are a wonderful way of conveying all the feels.
It's very interesting. Musicals, and as you all know, and as many of the listeners know, I have a little bit of a musical background myself. Musicals are story. Without a story, it isn't, in my opinion, it isn't a musical. It's a concert. So you need the story element to make it a musical. And just like all good storytelling, it does exactly what you're saying, Leon. It touches you in a really deep and visceral way. Mm-hmm. I agree.
And for me, growing up in the 50s and 60s, my family always had musicals, recordings and records of musicals.
You've always been a fan.
I've always been a big fan. And, of course, I started playing clarinet in 4th grade, saxophone in 7th grade, and then picked up the guitar as we started to get into a band.
Do you still play?
I still play a little bit. Not clarinet and sax, but I do play guitar and a little bit of piano. And so musicals I've always loved. And as a musician, I'm very keen on listening to the music, especially when we're in that process of looking and viewing whether we like a show to be something that we want to put on.
So in other words, you have a certain developed taste for music in general.
Sure.
And that's very helpful in terms of selecting what you're going to do. And we'll talk about the selection process here shortly. Nancy, why musicals?
I always have believed that I sing better than I do. So I always, I know that in the privacy of my car on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I can reach notes that are not found in nature, but they give me great joy. So I have always loved musicals. Again, like Bruce, I remember the record albums and the gramophone and playing records of musicals. Those were the only ones. Those and speeches from the UN. That was my parents' record collection.
Speeches from the UN?
There was a time in the 60s. I don't remember the 50s, Bruce. I wasn't around. But in the 60s where there were speeches from the UN, political speeches, and they used to make long playing record albums, and that was how people heard them before the internet, for your listeners.
Now, why has no one ever made a musical out of that? I don't know.
I don't know.
Nancy mentioned parents, and I think that's a really good point. My parents took me to the Old Nixon Theater, where I saw Herschel Bernardi as Tevye, and I saw the first touring company of Hair, which was shocking for an 8th grader, and to see Godspell.
It is.
And even my high school, junior high, we would go downtown for events and see theater, and mainly musicals. And so seeing those things and going to the old Playhouse and seeing Man of La Mancha there, it was inspiring. So of course, having seen fun, great, meaningful theater at that age, all I wanted to do was participate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you already brought up, so it's a good question. You've already brought up the notion of socially relevant musicals, which is a mantra of Front Porch Theatricals. Define for the listener who doesn't know what that means. What's a socially relevant musical?
I think we might all define it differently.
Great, let's hear the 3 definitions.
But we like to put on a show, my view of meaningful is giving the audience something that they would want to talk about in the car on the way home and still want to tell their friends about because the story touched them in a particular way. So it doesn't have to be about rallying people to a social cause, but it has to be something that they would say, boy, more than just I like that song or I like that performance, I either learned something or it touched something inside of me that I wouldn't have had if I had gone to see something a little bit more frivolous. And don't get us wrong, we love to go see other musicals that might not have socially relevant stories behind them,
Right.
but that's not what we like to put on. We really want to challenge our audience to think a little, to get involved in the story a little bit, and to care about the characters in a way that's a little bit
So
different.
I'm glad you said what you said a moment ago, because I think when you hear the word socially relevant, a lot of people will take that as the connotation of that is that they are about rallies and protests and politics and so on. It's not.
It's not about activism. It's about meaning and feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember very vividly an email that I got from friends of mine after having attended Parade the night before. And their email basically said, we couldn't stop thinking and talking about that show.
That's great.
And that had a huge impact on me because I realized, this social relevance thing really is good. It's a good thing. It really draws in audiences, and it really provides a high degree of satisfaction for them.
Mm-hmm. Leon?
And these are great answers, and I think that you said you would listen to 3 different answers. I think that we all have the same answer for what a meaningful, socially relevant musical is, and it's almost like the Supreme Court on obscenity. We know it when we feel it.
Right.
We know it when we see it. We
So obscene musicals would be good. No, I'm kidding.
But Bruce made the point about Parade. We did Floyd Collins, a very underknown musical about a true story.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our musicals involve true stories.
Same with Parade.
Parade and Grey Gardens, half of it's true, half of it's fantasy. And creative minds, Jason Robert Brown, and relationships and things that aren't frivolous.
So and the other thing that I think is sort of implied in there but isn't stated is that you tend not to do musicals that are super famous or super well produced.
So one of the things that super well produced doesn't bother us as much as if the market is saturated with a particular show.
I can't see you ever doing, say, for instance, a Les Miserables or Phantom of the Opera. I just don't see it.
I will not see I am famous for saying I will not see Les Miserables again until I have a grandchild in it. That show is off my list, only because it's saturated for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we love when somebody says, we just came back from New York, or we just came back from the Shaw Festival. We saw a musical. It's a Front Porch musical. You should consider it. So to us, we've established a lane, and people know that the musicals that we do are within our lane. So as we sit to try to decide what shows we'll do, we are very conscious of that lane, which sometimes may blur a little. Sometimes you're on the Turnpike or the Parkway and you got to take a little bit of a different road, but we kind of know that we have a lane.
So as a good example, and I'm only saying this to make an example of it, I don't see you guys ever producing Jekyll and Hyde. I don't think that fits into the Front Porch canon. I just don't see that.
Is the interview over now?
Yes. No, I love what you guys do. I truly do, and it doesn't matter to me whether you do or not. I just recognize that you have this lane that you're talking about.
And we feel the same way. We look at shows that are going to be coming down the pike. We tend to have to wait until after the first national tour, but then we're in there competing. to get the first local
Sure.
production like we are with, and you may cover this later, with Bright Star and Fun Home. Bright Star has never been seen in Pittsburgh.
That's coming up in your 2019 season.
Yep, in May. And then Fun Home came through only on tour. So when we can be the first company to regionally produce or to premiere a production, we'll go in that direction. And then we'll look at some of the really meaningful things that are happening on Broadway. Come From Away, Dear Evan Hansen. Maybe those are shows that we'll do in the future. You know, if we can get them where we have competition.
Right. So are there specific kinds of stories in your consideration of what you're going to produce that you specifically say we're not going to touch that at all ever? Are there stories that you avoid for one reason or another?
I'll give you one that people might say is a meaningful musical, and have we considered it? And since I've kind of sort of vetoed us ever doing it, I don't mind bringing it up in public. And the show is, for example, Assassins.
Okay.
And the reason why
That's Sondheim.
It's Sondheim, and it's the music. Some of the music is terrific, and some of the characters are great. And we have seen some really good productions of Assassins. For me, there's that 3 or 4 minutes in the show where they glorify guns that tells me I will never have my name associated with
Got
that
it.
show. So we have done some very difficult storylines. Parade is a very difficult storyline. Light in the Piazza. Some of them have been very difficult storylines with issues that you think you wouldn't want to touch in a musical. What were they thinking? But they have to sing to us.
Well, you have to believe in it too. You've got to sell it.
And Nancy brings up a good point about her own beliefs and about a specific subject matter or a topic that she's not comfortable with. Leon and I are also not comfortable with that particular topic either. But if there is a topic or a show that one of us really does not want to do, then that's it. We don't do it.
So you have a single veto power
Yep.
on something when you're obviously passionate about it.
It's consensus.
It's consensus,
So it's
not-
really consensus,
Got
not
it.
voting. It's
Right.
really consensus.
Well, I think that's a really wonderful way to work.
We also have a great deal of trust and faith in each other, and because of our non-theatrical skills, we have a lot of reliance on each other's business and marketing and financial skills
And legal.
and so we're able to speak with one voice even when we're speaking alone and not having consulted, because we generally have the same vision, and we like being a mature company, a young company of mature individuals, because things tend to be calmer. We try to slow things down. We try to create less chaos and more camaraderie. We see the mistakes that other people make, and we try to not make them.
One of the hallmarks that I have noticed in the several years in which I've known all three of you, and I've been to obviously a number of productions, and I've seen you all around, and I've sort of worked with Leon a little bit more than either Bruce or Nancy. But one thing that I notice as a hallmark of you that's just fascinating to me is that I don't ever sense that there's like any anger, animosity, disagreement. There might be, but you guys are really good at looking.
We're excellent actors.
You're really excellent at it. I think that's really important in terms of how you present to the public, even if you are having a disagreement back behind the scenes.
And how we present to our cast and our production team as
Absolutely.
well, because we say right from the beginning, look, in terms of the 3 producers, it's one voice. And if you get a decision from one of us on a particular topic, it goes for the 3 of us.
And every now and again, so we're all at rehearsals, but at different times. We're not all there for every rehearsal
Sure.
all the time together. So something will come up and a decision will be necessary. Some of the decisions are really easy for us to make on the spot, whichever one of us or 2 of us are there. But sometimes I'll say to them, because I'm there later at night, and I'll say to them, you know what? I'm going to get back to you on that. So we understand the concept of lanes, that we don't actually go outside our lane either in making decisions. Some of the decisions, we can be agnostic on it. Your answer, my answer might have been different than yours, but again, consensus. I can live with your answer.
My suspicion is that and I can kind of guess, but I'd like to hear it from you, that the 3 of you have specific strengths that complement the other 2. So I think that if you were all, every one of you was just an excellent stage technician expert, that would not be so good. But if you have different strengths, I think that helps. Now, that just came naturally. That wasn't something that you planned for.
Well, it evolved out of who we are as we brought ourselves into the process. Bruce is a business executive with great sales experience and really good with QuickBooks and very highly organized. Nancy is a foundation executive with a master's and lots of skills, and is able to help us in many, many areas, including running the best front of house any company has in town because our shows start on time. And I have a theater background and a legal background, and so we tend to do things right. We strive to do everything right in our relationships with our licensors and our venue.
And you have the great good fortune of having those three complement each other.
We think they complement each other very well.
I would say they do. If you told me that you were both, or all three of you, let's say, were lawyers, I would say that's probably not so great. Because I've worked with companies in which there were too many lawyers, and nobody knew what they were doing with the theater part of it.
You know, it's
I feel
interesting.
that way every day.
So in the history of nonprofits, and I do work in a nonprofit, and I have my entire career, there was a time when we thought that the only people who should be on nonprofit boards were people who had passion, and we never looked at what skills they brought in addition to their passion. And in the evolution of nonprofits, you realize that you need to have people with passion first and foremost, but in addition, then we need to figure out how we balance out the variety of skills, and that's true for us as producers, and it's true for the board. And then it becomes true for your tech team also, that you know that the people who will work best with you are the ones who can bring something to the table, but also care about the table. So it's that balance.
And that balance is really important, because if it's lopsided toward one thing or another, then things don't run so smoothly.
Right.
So we all have our specific skills and areas that we focus on in terms of what we do day to day for the productions. But there's a great deal of collaboration on certain big decisions, such as who's going to direct the next show. I mean, the major personnel decisions. Those are all things.
That's a huge
that
decision.
the three of us work together on. Not one of us will say, well, I already picked the director. I mean, we don't do that.
I would never guess that would be your way to do that.
Right.
As
No.
that one of you dominated the other two. That just doesn't seem to be who you guys are.
Right.
And I think that is a great testament to the way that you operate, because you can be sure there are plenty of organizations that don't operate that way, where somebody is dominating somebody else.
I don't think that the work that we do as Front Porch Theatricals would have been possible in a different era, particularly the era before unlimited text messaging and phone calls, because there's a lot of that goes on between the three of us.
It just would have taken you longer between.
And been very expensive.
And very expensive for
On the
sure.
unlimited plans, we do okay.
Okay, so do you, when you pick your shows, so let's talk a little bit about show selection and how you go through this process of picking something. Do you first think of your audience, or do you first think of show that works for you? Or is it a combination of those?
Well, we have a master list of probably about 150 shows that have already met the major criteria of meaningful musicals and socially relevant. So from that list, now we add to the list from time to time as shows come out on Broadway and we become aware of it. And then we kind of cull it down every year and say, okay, now the personal preferences come in, or the preferences of, let's see what's hot, let's see what our audiences would like. And then we get it down to maybe 20 or 10, and then we get some outside help from there.
Or actually, board member help.
Yeah, true.
We get board member help, and we also ask a handful of directors and other trusted advisors to give us their impressions on shows and to add more shows.
So when you say help, you're talking about feedback.
Yes.
Because
Feedback and input.
Because you have done the legwork of deciding which group of shows you're going to pick from.
Right.
But every now and again, when we'll talk to a director or we'll talk to someone else, they'll say, have you considered X? And X wasn't on our list, but we'll take a look at it. And sometimes X makes it to the list, maybe not for that season, maybe for another season. But again, it goes back to them understanding our lane and saying, this is a show you'd want to do, you should do it.
Have you? I know your very first show was an original,
Yes.
right? Have you thought about doing more originals?
We have.
We actually have. And while we have nothing to announce, and while there are other theater companies in town that do a really good job with new works,
Yes.
doing new musical works excites us, and we're hopeful that we can find a product that we can evolve into a special event or an additional show or something as we continue to grow and evolve the company.
That's great. I hope that you're able to do that, because I'm a firm believer in the development of new stuff. Though what you do is what you do. And it's not like you're producing 6 or 8 shows
Right.
a year. You're
Right.
only producing 2 a year. So you have to be super selective as to what you choose.
And while we're trying to bring in newer shows, things that are less known or less produced so that the audience is going to get a fresh experience, at the same time, we're also looking in our master list and even in our list of 20, we have shows that are from the 40s and 50s. So Showboat may be a very important show in this era. or Shenandoah, or shows that involve
Is he lobbying?
conflict.
Just so
no, I'm not
just so
lobbying.
the listeners know,
I'm getting a look.
Leon got strange looks off a showboat in Shenandoah.
Well,
No, just about
those are
sharing names
great
of shows
shows.
that are under consideration,
Yeah,
because
but they're
now
not
all
on-
the other theater companies will pick them up, but that's okay.
That's happened before.
But given the country in which we live, then we can look back to shows that were sensitive to some of the issues we're still confronting. And so it doesn't have to be a current show. It doesn't have to be, from the 90s on. It can be a show of import.
And Parade is a good example of that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's
Though you've tended toward those.
We do tend toward those because we tend to want to do regional premieres. We tend to want to do things that are less well known. I mean, Floyd Collins was not done,
Right.
and Parade is infrequently
Well,
done.
I don't want to get off onto Floyd Collins at all, really, but Floyd Collins is a difficult show.
Mhm.
It was.
It's not an easy show either to produce or understand or follow. It's a little bit challenging for an audience.
But we had a great up-and-coming director who was passionate for the project, and enabled her to spread her artistic wings, to spread some visual
and
wings
she's
to
a
create.
very good
Yes.
director.
Yeah, Rachel Stevens, a very good director.
Super.
And
Incredible staging, great eye for staging.
And while our company does not have its own physical plant building,
Mhm.
we now do own, I think, a dozen ladders as a result of Floyd Collins production. So if anyone is has an interest in borrowing a ladder, Front Porch is well
I would
laddered.
say for you, it's all up.
Ba-dum-bum.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a tough question that I've asked lots of guests on this show, and I love the answers that I get. What for you makes a good show good?
Mm.
Why is a show good?
So I might
Stump the
answer it differently than the others, but there's something that happens during the course of a good show where we can see moments for our actors where they shine, where you just know that you're experiencing somebody's high in their career for that moment. Grey Gardens is a perfect example of being able to watch somebody. Dana Michelle Griffith was born to play that role,
No question.
without a doubt. I
No
mean, she
question.
embodied that character, and watching her have that moment was incredible for all of us. Billy Hartung in Big Fish, incredible for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes it's a young actor. One of the things we love about doing this is we give, I think it's been every show so far, at least one of our actors is getting their first professional paycheck.
Isn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
And so if nothing else happens during the run of that show, that's a good show for us, that we have helped someone in their career, on stage, backstage, as an intern. So for us, it's the whole package. And then when the audience responds to it, that just makes it a great show for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think audience response is a big part of it. I would agree, of course.
So a
with
good show
Nancy.
for you is based on audience
I mean, the
response.
comments and the emails.
But how do you
and-
know that when you're picking it?
Well, we don't.
don't.
We just suspect.
So let me
That's
suggest.
that risk you talked about.
It is, but
Mhm.
let me suggest that you're the first audience.
Yes, we are. And again, back to the idea, well, had we ever heard of that musical before, if it came up to us, our own experience, sometimes there are shows that we might select that none of us have seen before, which is rare, actually. Typically, we have seen the show. For instance, Fun Home, all three of us have seen. Bright Star, though, none of us saw it.
How did you pick it then? What was your process on that?
Well, it was a combination of things. We loved the story. It was a terrific story. I, in particular, loved the music. And it's interesting. It's a kind of a quirky story because I'm a musician.
Mhm.
I listened to the music one time, and I came back to them and said, I don't know if this is really what we want. This is kind of different kind of music.
It's bluegrass.
Yeah, it's bluegrass,
Although
right?
two of our prior shows have had southern
Sure.
bluegrass music.
That's true.
Absolutely.
But my initial reaction was, I'm not so sure. And then I thought about it later, listened to the music further. Now I love the music. And so that helped me decide that it was a combination of a good story and great music.
In the case of Bright Star, is part of the equation for you as producers that it has a very famous author attached?
That's a big part of it, of course.
Well, marketing is always important.
Well, that's what I mean.
So we have to be mindful of that.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I just, my own personal experiences, whenever I'm out and I'm talking to people about our show or our company, when I think about telling them about Bright Star, I usually will say, it's Steve Martin. And then I was talking to one person recently, and I said, this is great bluegrass music. It's Steve Martin. And I said, have you ever heard of Edie Brickell? He went, oh, yeah. I said, well, it's both of them then.
Hey, Edie Brickell's no slouch.
Right,
know?
Exactly.
I mean, lots of people are fans of Edie Brickell.
Sure.
I want to give a shot at your answer.
Yes, yeah, please. I hadn't forgotten you.
Because I know a show is good as soon as casting is over. And I've said this before. So I know we're going to succeed now because we've cast.
Well, but that's good production, Leon. What makes the show itself good before you ever get to production?
What makes a show good?
In other words, you have to make a decision. We're going to pick this show, not that show, way before casting. You may have casting in mind, but that doesn't mean you're locked them in, right?
Well, that's true. There's a lot as the lawyer, curmudgeon. We do look at all of the tangibles. Does it need choreography? Does it need a big band? Can we afford a large cast? And so, what makes a show good?
Is there a gigantic set or 12 sets?
Exactly. And we've not always made money with our shows. When we haven't, it's because we've not controlled costs and sets have been huge. So we learn through those experiences. Mm-hmm. But what makes a good show is everything that happens between casting and loadout. Our process, as you talk about our process, being involved in the room, feeding all the actors, having a great craft services through Nancy.
That's also your hallmark, isn't it?
And the table. It's not just the actors. The family extends beyond the actors to the musicians, to the entire tech team, our interns and apprentices. So that's really important that nobody feels lesser than anybody else in the room.
We've had shows where people didn't quite get the show, but to us, it was a tremendous experience and good show because the experience turned out to be a great experience.
I will not go through any of it, but there was one show in particular that you did that I didn't like the show itself. I loved the production because you guys do great productions. I didn't like the show.
But that's something.
But it didn't matter to me because I had a good time.
Right, and that's something people will talk about after. Boy, that wasn't my cup of tea, but wasn't that an interesting this or that?
And if you keep doing that, just that alone will keep carrying you forward. Obviously, you have to come off the shows people like.
We have audience members that often will tell us things that we can't do anything about. My favorites were the people who came to both Parade or Floyd Collins and didn't like that the main character died in the end. Those stories were both based on real experiences. Not much we can do about it. So
I wish that Titanic had stayed afloat.
Seriously, if they had just righted the rudder or something, we could have had a better show. But yeah.
Did you have something else you were going to say, Leon?
No, I'm good.
You're good. All right. So some people, in the real world, so to speak, not in the artistic world or the creative world, don't think of producers as creative types. They think of producers as being nuts and bolts, money handling, logistics, and so on. I think that you three are fairly creative about the way that you come about things. What is it that you do that you can express to the listeners about what you do as producers that requires creativity?
We may not be as creative as you think, but we are very trusting in the creative skills of the people that we work with. And I say that.
I don't mean artistically creative. I mean creative. You must do things that are creative all the time in how you conduct business.
I have a speech that I give at every first rehearsal meeting and at every first production meeting.
Does it have to do with turning off your cell phone?
It does not have to do with turning off your cell phone. And it has to do with creating a chaos-free environment. It has to do with telling people, all of whom are artistically charged and very good at what they do, that they have to communicate and collaborate wonderfully, because we have a short tech week and we have a lot of stuff to get done. And my spiel is that when something goes wrong in an operating room, people get more serious, more quiet, more focused. Mm-hmm. If something's wrong on the launch pad, no one starts yelling at each other. We've watched terrible techs come in, and over the last several years, we have we have bought a new flooring so we can save 4 hours on painting a floor. We have hired more freely overhires, professionals who are able. We have a very strong internship and apprenticeship program, and these people are learning and gaining experience. But we learned that we also need a couple of people with strong hands-on experience. So we've tightened our productions and our mechanisms and created a more relaxed environment.
So you've learned from where there were flaws at the time of one production or another.
Every
and
year.
Compensated for
Yeah,
that.
and I think that speaks to our business skills
I'm sure
because
it
as
does.
producers, each of us have our own individual areas where we're strong in, but we're all three business people, and we deal all the time. And so business does have innovation and creativity.
100%. That's what I was getting
And I
at.
think we dwell on some of our business skills to come up with sort of creative ways to tell the story to foundations, or creative ways to develop programs that help us be more efficient with our costs. Because truly, it is a business.
So
It
I
is
look at,
called show
it
business.
is called
Yes,
show
that's
business.
true.
And I look at it a little bit differently, and it harkens back, I guess, to the fact that I started in theater when I was very, very young, and I don't have a bad experience to share, or why would I have stayed, in all of those years of elementary school and high school and through college. I had no bad experiences with theater. And I hear so often of actors or tech people who will talk about their bad experiences in theater, and I feel really badly for them. I feel that theater should be a place of work. It is a business. You should take things seriously, but you should be able to get some joy out of it as well. For any of us who have a day job, when we have absolutely no joy in our day job, it doesn't have to be all the time every single day, but when we have absolutely no joy in the people that we encounter or the work that we do or how we spend our time, that's sad. And theater for us shouldn't be a place of sadness. So I love doing this together with Leon and with Bruce, but with Leon because it's otherwise would be a lot of time apart as a couple. And now it's a lot of time together with a shared vision as a couple, and that's really very nice for us. So for me,
that's powerful.
Mhm.
Same thing, Leon?
I'm not going to argue against that.
And that's how a marriage works.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so let's talk about putting production together. You have now chosen a show. You've announced your season, which is well ahead of going into production itself. You perhaps have some casting figured out or none. Okay, so what is the first thing you do as you start to put your production or your whole season together? What, from a producing standpoint, what do you do?
Plan.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a lot of effort in putting together a plan. And after having done this for almost 10 seasons now, it's become more mechanical. We understand what has to be done when, and we put together, plans. When are we going to audition? How are we going to advertise that audition? And then, let's think about how we're going to market this show. That's more conceptual. We see a show like Bright Star. How are we going to market that? It's not that well known, so let's think about ways to market that show.
Do you have a marketing company, or do you do
No,
it yourself?
We do it ourselves. We do have a creative marketing director, Jue, who works with us, and he's been with us for a few years now. We have some interns that participate with us on marketing, but we'll be final eyes on a lot of things. We may not have the cut and paste technical skills on the technology side to do all of it ourselves. For that, we bring in people to do it, but we do all of that marketing ourselves.
Okay, so you're now in this planning phase, and you're starting to plan for a lot of different parts of it at one time.
But I was going to answer the question a little bit differently
Sure,
than Bruce.
please.
I don't think it starts from when we pick our show. I think that one of the hallmarks of what we do, and we are relentless about this, is we debrief. We don't even call it debriefing. It was a typo once, and we stick with it. But we debrief all the time. After every show, after the season, we look at what happened, what we could have done differently, how we would do it differently the next time. We actually kind of sort of write it down so we'll remember what it is. We rank ourselves and our whole team internally, just the three of us. No one sees it. Every single aspect of the production that just concluded, we rank it for ourselves so that we know, you know what, that person, that style, that timing, that show, that music director, you name it. We rank it so we know we would do this again, we wouldn't do it again, and what we might change for it.
So you have learned over time things that you wouldn't do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's really strong.
And yet we're still married. That's not what you said.
We've also learned to let go of things, so that when we hire
Such as? Give us some
when we
examples.
hire our director, it's usually someone who's either up and coming or new to Pittsburgh, wants to be exposed, who we think is special,
But from Pittsburgh.
and has the appropriate Pittsburgh connection. We empower those people to tell us who they want to work with, to help complete their artistic vision with artists that they have a language with, so they can share and grow. And we as producers, we tend to support that. And as a company, we like to say, well, we like to say yes until you make us say no. And so we're always going to try to strive for.
Say that again. We say that again.
We like to say yes until you make us say no.
Interesting. Very interesting.
We also surround a really good director with some anchors. So some of our lessons learned have been about some of the terrific anchors within this community of technical talent. And depending on
designers.
Correct.
Yeah, designers mostly.
Designers. And depending on the experience and skill of our director, they may or may not need stronger anchors than others, so they have more or less leeway to pick their own team in certain departments. But some of them will trust us enough to say, I don't know anyone who does costume. I don't know anyone who does, and we'll work with that. Or they come in and say, I'd like to work with so-and-so. Okay.
And as part of our general outreach, we try to elevate people who are up and coming, so that for the last several years, we've talked to the people at CMU about using their grad students as costume designers. And so we have a nice relationship there. We have strong relationships with both Point Park and CMU, and we use their students and Pitt, and we use their students for a number of things, not only intern apprenticeship, but they're in our shows, and it makes for a good relationship. Pittsburgh is like that, though. Everyone is very supportive.
So that's a corporate philosophy, how you operate then. And you are pretty good at sticking to those guns, aren't you?
Well, we also don't own a building. We don't own a scene shop. We don't own a warehouse.
Right.
We don't have to have all those things, because Pittsburgh is really a warm and supportive community.
Oh, for sure. Pittsburgh is a...
And what you can't rent, you can borrow.
Right. And we also don't pre-cast. You made some comment about you may have some people in mind for casting. So casting decisions are not ours until they become ours, when there's a problem after auditions and there's a hole that needs to be filled, and we help to do some more outreach to find some more potential actors. But we don't go into a show pre-cast in any way. We like our auditions to be free and open. We want actors to trust us that they're walking through the door and they do their best job. That job is available to them if they win it that day.
It's interesting how that differs from some companies around town that tend to go toward the same people over and over again.
Well, you know who you like. You know who's really good at a certain role,
Sure.
or a really fine actress who could do any role, but you still want to, there's always surprises. And because Pittsburgh is becoming a community that actors are moving into and not away from, in strong numbers.
And more so than ever.
Then we're seeing new people that we didn't expect to see. Oh, so-and-so will get this role. Well, so-and-so doesn't get this role because there's a new so-and-so in town.
And that so-and-so is better than the first so-and-so.
Or different and new.
And, as you well know, with casting, they have to match up to others. So
Of course.
it's not an individual decision based on the role.
So,
it's the director's
you've
vision
never
for the whole
gone,
show.
you've yet to, and maybe never will, you've never gone into a production in which, let's just use Grey Gardens as an example. You didn't go into Grey Gardens saying, we're casting Dana Michelle Griffith in that part.
That's correct, because we once cast Dana Michelle Griffith in a part and gave her to a director who loved her, but that was the wrong thing for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
We got ahead of our process in just that one instance.
What we do is make
Our first
people that we are aware of out in the community, we make them known to the director, and we make arrangements for the director to see.
Got it.
But we don't make that final decision.
So it's not that you're not saying to the director, here, this is what you get.
No.
You're letting the director make his or her own decision.
Correct.
I think that's quite wise. One of the things that I think is particularly great about the productions that I see at Front Porch are I think that you make a whole lot of show out of very little. I think you're really good at it. That doesn't mean there's nothing there. It means there's plenty there. What it means is that you take, your designers have a tendency to take suggestive things and make them seem gigantic. Is that an intentional thing on your part?
And it's not even
Let's
a
all say
financial.
yes together.
Yes.
And it's not even for financial reasons as the root. It's the trust of the audience that I believe that good theater invites an audience in to use their imagination
No question.
and to be part of the show. So
I think no question. I think that the beauty part of theater is that you do use your imagination far more than you do with a movie or a TV show.
Right. And we don't want to show them a movie or a TV set. We want them to look at it and figure out how it's going to work. When the people walked into Floyd Collins and saw 110 pallets and 11 ladders, I'm sure they were curious about how this show, which is about a cave, is all of that.
Or they just thought that you hadn't quite finished tech.
Right.
Yeah,
And
the
yet,
ladders were
and
just
yet
sitting there. Yeah.
using such local excellent designers and people who can make $5,000 look like $1 million is also worth it.
Well,
it gives the audience, it inspires.
That's what I'm really talking about, is that you take it doesn't. I can tell that you're not spending a fortune, but you're getting a fortune's worth out of it.
Yeah, we feel that way.
It's important.
And so that is a corporate decision. That's not. And do you impose that on the designers then? Do you limit their budget so that they're forced to think that way?
We do, but we tell them in advance.
yeah,
Well,
I mean,
Right.
they know.
Yeah,
that-
they know what their budget is.
the words impose and limit are negative words.
Okay.
We share with them firstly, some of them are designers who've worked with us in the past. We share with them what our budget range is. We ask them what their vision is. And
So they know in advance what they're working
and
with.
they rise to the occasion. Many of them, they're not they know we're not bringing them in from New York City to do something on a level that they understand. And many of our designers have seen our shows. That's important to us also, that they understand the vision of the company. And that's the same is true with the directors, so that they don't come in with, for our company, unreasonable expectations.
Okay, so you had alluded to earlier that over time and clearly it's a learning process, an ongoing learning process for all three of you, and that every time you learn something, you will do something now that you would not have done before, and vice versa, things that you do now that you would not do in the future. So, for instance, give us some examples of things that you do in working with either actors or directors or designers or working with production as a whole, that you will continue to do more of, that you've discovered along the way.
I would say production meetings that function in a way that is high level communication for everybody on the team.
What was it before?
There have been some shows where we did not plan out the expectation of how often the production team would meet and what we needed as milestones, et cetera. And it led to Leon's concept of chaos that is not something that was satisfying for people. So knowing that we want a production process that is smooth, we have now gotten better at developing calendars and lists and ways to communicate with people that make sure that things are delivered in a timely fashion, not for us, but for each other as members of a team.
Mm-hmm. So
we've also grown in that we didn't have a production manager or a company manager or any of fairly critical company positions.
You were doing that yourself.
We were doing it ourselves. We three were the company manager and production manager.
Were you at times floundering because it wasn't your expertise?
Well, I mean, we were driving trucks that we couldn't handle, and we were trying to figure out where things move and coordinating five different stops on
So you want to be in show business.
Exactly.
Right.
But what we have done is actually we got better at all of that. But we hired a company manager. We're still looking for the right production manager. We have to give them responsibilities. And stop doing the things that they did or that we did. But we're growing. And so that's just one way that we're growing more efficient, more structured. We have very good stage managers, and you don't want to screw that up by being a disorganized producer. And so because of the people we're hiring, because of the expectations they have of us as well, we had to up our game. We had to be not necessarily more serious, but more focused and organized and diligent. And so I think we are.
You've learned efficiencies along the way.
It's important. You
Some
waste
of
a
us
lot of money.
started efficient.
Yeah, and some of us are just literally starting to learn.
Yeah. But I think all of that really gets into the point that many of our actors and even auditioners who don't get a role tell us, this environment, this opportunity, this experience was so much better than I even thought or have experienced anywhere else. And so I think you put that all together, and it makes for a very satisfying experience for our actors, designers, and of course, audience members.
Do all three of you think that this would be very different if you were doing this as a full-time year-round project where you were doing 8 shows in the year?
Yes.
It would be very different.
So
It would only be better.
it's a privilege for us to do 2 shows and do them well.
Well, that you do, and that's clear.
Yeah. So because that's our commitment, and the commitment may expand. I'm getting eyes from both sides, but because that's our commitment, and we know how to balance those 2 things and how to plan for those 2 things and do it really well. If it had to be 8 shows a year, and that was our mandate, and that's what we did, and that's what the board told us, don't tell us, then we would be perhaps not able to be as selective in the shows that we did. We would wonder how our mission might fray. Right now, we are so committed to that mission of local. That matters to us so much. People locally trained, raised here, went to school here, living here, making their career here. That really matters to us. If I was doing 8 shows a year, would we have a sufficient pool for all of those talents to have come locally?
Without repeating constantly.
Correct. We don't know. So the fact that we have the 2 is the privilege that allows us to stay focused on that mission of content, that mission of team, and that mission of local.
Okay, I think that's phenomenal. But I do think that the question was, what would happen if you expanded out to 8 shows? And I've known this answer for some time. I just wanted to hear you guys say it, that the focus on 2 shows a year, and as Leon was saying earlier, potentially a third kicker of some type,
Right.
but that's not the norm. I think that this makes you use the term in your introduction as boutique,
Right.
and that's what makes you a boutique.
And the other third thing that we do in a year is the Monday after Thanksgiving, our cabaret that we do that celebrates our past season and announces our next season has become somewhat of a thing in very short order. We've only had 3 of them, and yet they've gone from sold out in too small of a venue to sold out in a larger venue. And it's a great coming together of community. Our audiences who love our show that want to come and hear these wonderful actors and singers from that current season and other seasons come together joyously to celebrate the company. So our Front Porch family, because a lot of them are local and still local, they see each other at different auditions. They see each other in different shows. And when they come together to celebrate each other and the company at our cabaret, it's a celebration across the board.
It's like inviting the public to a large cast party.
And yet it's still a fundraiser as
Correct.
well.
A successful fundraiser that we hope
Very
grows from year to
successful.
year.
And I think that hopefully that will expand even further to where it requires a bigger venue than
Correct.
you have.
But this year it'll be December 1st, the Monday after Thanksgiving at the CLO Cabaret, we think. So we would hope that everybody would put it on their calendar.
Just for the record, it's no longer the
It's
CLO
the Greer-
Cabaret.
it's
It's
the
the
Greer
Cabaret.
Cabaret.
I'm not even sure who Greer is. Somebody will explain it to me someday, but that's a perfectly fine thing. Okay, so I just want to go over your marketing for a little bit. We talked about it in brief. What do you do? Do you plan your marketing as a group? And then you bring Jue in
Well,
what-
Jue's involved.
Right from the beginning of
From
it.
the beginning, but in terms of evolution of marketing, we used to put ads in the paper. We used to spend a lot more, and then social media really takes off, and everyone you want to reach, 80% of the people you want to reach, you can reach through the internet. Traditionally, we put up posters and we send out postcards because people still like getting them, and it's a good reminder.
But we have a 12-month marketing calendar.
Yeah.
That
you
is
market year round.
Well, you have
Well,
to
you
be
want- you want
involved
people
in
to be
marketing
aware
your
of you.
company. So we have different strategies for during our season and during the weeks leading up to our season and then in the off season. So we've worked really hard on building our brand.
Did you learn this on your own, or did you bring it from your business background?
Well, I think probably both. But I will say this: the day after Grey Gardens closed, we had a meeting for what do we do next. And part of it was the debrief or the debrief that we talk about. But part of it is, all right, this is a 12-month program for us, even though we only do 2 shows.
Well, that tells the listener just how intense it is to produce 2 shows a year.
Yeah.
They meet for something like 8 months before they produce one show called
Right.
the Oscars.
Yeah.
Right.
For one night.
Right.
But that's a gigantic.
And we also,
endeavor.
because we're only doing 2 shows a year and because we are, so to speak, dark in terms of the attendance by an audience during the other periods of time, we like to take that time to help be supportive of the rest of the theater company. So we are out and about at everybody else's shows and events, etc. And we love to celebrate the accomplishments of other theater companies, and particularly where our actors and directors and technicians are having their moments in the sun. We like to celebrate that too, and social media is a great help in that regard. So we're able to just keep that family spirit alive. We believe that the success of live musical theater in Pittsburgh is a success for all of us, not just for Front Porch. So elevating that profile of musical theater in the community matters to us a lot.
Well, I think that is abundantly clear to most of the community. You know, is there one thing that if you had a chance to do it over again differently, is there one thing you would? And it doesn't mean getting married to Leon.
Boy, this was a great two-person operation.
You'd be starving if it were two-person.
Yeah.
Did I stump you?
What would we do better? What would we do differently?
What would you do differently or better? Or even just totally differently?
Well, I would do everything better, not a whole lot differently, because we learned so much from the path that we were on that I don't think we could have come to be in this place at this time without the stumbles, the anxiety, and then the joy of these successes. So I really wouldn't change anything.
I don't have a do-over.
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is that we may have tried to introduce a production manager earlier in our process so that we're not up late, delivering things to the warehouse ourselves. Less chaos, yeah, sure.
I think that's good. And the fact that you don't have one of those in your, most people that have produced lots of shows over time, they go, oh my goodness, I wish I had picked a different show. I wish I had picked a different person and blah, blah, blah. But you folks are doing what you like.
We've had to put money into a couple of shows. That didn't make us happy. We would not want to do that again, but it taught us about overbuilding sets or overcommitting the number of equity contracts or things that just got our budget out of control.
But to be clear, as a 501c3, each and every one of us, including all of our board members, has no problem contributing to the company. That's different than having to make up a deficit at the end. So those are two different kinds of putting money into something. None of us would step back from wanting to make a contribution to the company. We would step back for having to make a contribution to the company because something went wrong.
Well, from what I can tell, you folks are running a pretty even-keeled, clean shop in terms of you're not running around chasing money all the time. So many theater organizations are, even the big ones.
Well, and having sold out the last two August productions, we're in pretty decent shape financially, and we've had surpluses and so forth.
That go right
They
back
go
into the
immediately
company.
Go right back into
So it
the company.
allowed us to get the rights to Fun Home early, the day they became available. Leon was stocking them, the licensor, to make sure that we could get the rights. And as soon as we could get the rights, we were able to put the money down to get that. So it's the nice, the cash flow of a nonprofit that is really very successful now.
Yeah, that is a wonderful thing. Are there special places that you look for new shows? Is there any particular places you're always going back to? Or is it you're just searching the world?
Just searching.
Well, I think we keep on searching. Ted Pappas, who was a wonderful supporter of ours.
And also a guest on StoryBeat.
And who came to every one of our shows on the Sunday matinee. And Bruce and I would just go sit next to him and pepper him with producer questions. And he gave us wonderful advice. But some of the best advice he gave us was, he said, try picking shows that at least have a gentle carbon footprint.
What does that mean?
What that means is quit doing shows that no one's ever heard of. And
Because it makes it harder for us.
Sure it does.
Right. Now, he loves the artisticness of what we did with the shows that no one's ever heard of. But he says, it helps in marketing. And marketing has changed over the years. He said he used to know through subscribers and others that who his audience would be. And now he says he doesn't know on a Saturday what his Saturday night audience is going to be because people are picking up their phones and buying instantaneously. So it's a completely different world. And so every little bit that you can have helps. If they recognize the show, that helps. If they recognize the brand name, Front Porch Theatricals, that helps. If they recognize Bruce, Leon, and Nancy, that helps. If they've been to our shows, that helps because they grow our audience. So we're continually trying to solidify that base and then grow it.
Well, I certainly, for one, have noticed and commend you that the shows the last couple of seasons are definitely more familiar to a wider audience.
Yeah.
And we also back up our marketing. We've now started to back up to try to train the audience to teach them what the show is in advance. So it's not about selling tickets. It's about building their desire to come and see that story. We're storytellers, and we use musicals as those vehicles. So we want to engage them in that story so that they'll want to come and hear that story.
That's outstanding. So we've been talking for a good hour and 3 minutes already, and we're going to come down
That's
to
like a short producer's
It
meeting.
is. It's a short producer's meeting. Or a short night, one of the two.
Yeah.
So we're going to ask you the last two questions here. You've obviously worked at this point in all of your careers with lots of different people in both the entertainment industry and outside of it. Do you have any stories from all of your experiences that are kind of oddball, quirky, offbeat, funny, just weird in that way? Anything like that?
Yeah, I have one that's kind of takes us back to how the company actually got started a little bit more in detail. This neighbor of mine, Doris Esteban, had approached me, as I said before, about putting on a musical, about producing a musical. And it was in 2001 initially, and she asked me about composers, and that's when we got David Ed involved because I had known him. He had actually been a music director for one of my son's shows in high school. And then in 2003, I saw her again on the street in Swickley, and she said, well, thank you for bringing in David Ed. That was great. Now we're ready to produce. And I said, oh, gee, Doris, I'm really sorry. We're about to leave. My wife has a job out of town, and we're going to move. So we won't be around anymore to help you. And as it turns out, we left for about 2 years. And 2 years later, we came back, and it turns out we hadn't sold our house, unfortunately. So we moved right back into that house. And I saw Doris on the street, and I said to her, Doris, how did that musical ever come about? And she said, it didn't. We were waiting for you. And I was just stunned. And as it turns out, that's when I turned to Leon. And I said, we got to get this thing going here. So we did, and eventually we put it on.
Everybody who's ever written a musical needs a neighbor like you.
How true.
Leon, Nancy?
Just thinking back on, there's a whole lifetime of theater, but thinking back on what we do and what happens with what we do, I'm reminded of two visuals from young people who were working for our company in Violet and in Big Fish. We had youths, and they would hang with our equity people. They would hang with all of the other actors, and all of the other actors gave them their time. The young woman who was talking to a young person who had done the New York thing and come back and was working here now, asking questions about New York. Little Mario Williams and Big Fish, who would not want to leave rehearsal even when he wasn't called, and who begged his mother to let him come in just to work with Billy Hartung and the others, and just absorbing all of that. It's very inspiring. I mean, we live in a town of great inspirational theater with Point Park and CMU and the Playhouse here and the Purnell Center. It's all wonderful, and watching these people come into our theater company, and we don't make them, but we get to see them for a short period along the way, and they go to Broadway.
And let's not forget all the professional shows that come through town.
Absolutely, and so. To me, the fun part of doing all this is watching actors communicate, grow, share, and be kind. It's a wonderful community, and
it
so
certainly is.
I don't say that that's a quirky thing, but it is a great joy to be able to be with these creative, passionate, energetic people. I'll just in closing, I'll mention that I was so excited when we did In the Heights, because I learned the names of 21 new young people. And I remembered their names. And so we're in rehearsals, we're in the room where it happens, and we get to know these people, and they're generous, and we know who likes Twizzlers, and we know who likes the Rice Krispie treats, and they give so much to us. We feel like this is just all bonus. This is all gravy.
So I wasn't going to say something, but I will. So following up on that, we keep in touch with these people, and some of them have gone on to Broadway, and some of them have gone on to national tours, and some of them are all over the country. We keep in touch with them through Facebook and other ways. When Leon celebrated his 60th birthday last year, we went to New York City to see some theater, and I put the word out to some of those people that we were going to be in New York City, and we're going to be celebrating Leon's birthday, and here's my schedule for the weekend. Show up whenever you want to show up. I'll feed you, which is what they're used to having me do. And for just about every meal when we were in New York City, people showed up. actors showed up that had been with us, some of them once, some of them 2 and 3 times. And when the clock struck 12 on midnight and he turned 60, we were in a speakeasy 2 blocks off of Broadway, lifting a glass with about 12 people who had been with us as directors and actors in the show. And that said it all to us. That was all about the family that we had created.
Isn't that
and
wonderful?
It was really
And
thrilling.
Laurie Metcalf was sitting in the seat behind us.
She was not invited.
She
nor
was
she
not
part of our
invited, but
family,
she was there.
She would have been welcome.
Did you invite her over?
We put her in the pictures, not unbeknownst to her. She's in some of our
The-
pictures.
her face or the back of her head?
I got a good one in the back of her head.
Okay, last question. Do you have a solid piece of advice or tip for those who are just trying? You're just talking about the young people that are using, or not using, but coming to Front Porch as a means to learn. Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip for those who are trying to break in, or those who are trying to that are maybe in a little bit but trying to get to that next level?
You know, if they want to be producers at some point, I would say and highly recommend our experience, and that is get a partner. Don't try to do it by yourself, because that really makes a difference. And I've provided that consultation with other people in business as well who wanted to start up a business. Get a partner. Get someone that you're comfortable with that also has skills that complement yours. But if you're talking about actors and things, my son-in-law is an actor as well. In fact, he was in Parade. And one thing he told me about trying to give advice to people who are acting, he's a great dancer. He actually is the dance instructor at Swickley Academy right now. And he said that when he was in New York, one thing that he would recommend for actors to try to break in was take a dance class, a lesson from someone who is a choreographer in New York, in this case, who you think you may be able to influence in some way, but take the class. And the same thing would happen here in Pittsburgh. If you want to be an actor in Pittsburgh, take a class with Dana or with Robin Parrish. You know, because that would really help you become known and also help hone your skills. So I think it's pretty good advice.
I think that's excellent advice.
So my advice relates not only to actors, but to a lot of our interns and apprentices. It's not easy to get your first job in theater. I don't want to say that it is. But once you get your first job, that's your pathway to all of your other jobs. Treat everybody nicely. Be as professional as you could be your genuine self, because there is a tremendous amount of competition out there. We are very proud of the fact that our interns and apprentices and tech people get hired by all the other companies in town. They know that if they've been a Front Porch intern or apprentice, they've done real work, and they'll call us for a reference, and we'll give them a reference, and these people will get hired other places. Same is true with actors. Don't come in and expect that the whole world is going to bow down to you. Become part of the team. Read the room. Understand what your role is. Make sure that you are doing everything you can be to be as generous as you can to everybody else in the room. We try to do it as producers. We try to encourage everybody on our team to be as understanding and generous to everybody else as they can be, because that second job and that third job, those are the harder ones to get, because you build a reputation based on your first one.
That's very good. I've told people for a long time there are two big hills in the show business world. The first is getting your break and getting in, and the much more difficult hill, which is much steeper and much more difficult, is keeping it.
Correct.
And that's what you're alluding to, which is great. Leon.
If you're going to be in the business of theater, I think you should be serious about the business of theater as an actor or a producer. We see about 200 people a year at auditions.
250.
Or more.
Or more.
And if you want to raise yourself to the next level, you have to be committed to your craft. You have to be committed to education, as Bruce said. You have to be committed to working with people and taking classes. You have to be taking jobs. You have to not be a jerk. If you want to break in, be there. Go to the auditions. Do the work. Don't be afraid, and don't get discouraged. There's 20 people, talented people, going out for every one role that you want, who are qualified, and so you have to be special. You can be charming. You can come in and do the Cup song from Perfect Pitch or whatever before your audition. Say, I just want to show you this. I remember you. I remember what you do. You have to have a special skill that you can do that is creative. I will remember that. Just, be the best and the most prepared you can possibly be, and then have fun. Because we notice when people are nervous and not doing their best job because they're standing in front of it, they're standing in their own way, but it's really about joy. I mean, this is a disciplined business. You have to work hard and practice hard and be serious at rehearsal, but you can have fun every other moment and you can have joy.
I would say that last piece of advice is maybe the ultimate piece of advice for everyone in the business in all aspects of it. It's show business.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not having fun, why are you doing this? So you need to continue to have fun.
You have ended this for all of us very well.
Yes, thank you. You
a
have
good note to end on.
ended. I want to thank my guests today, Bruce Smith, Nancy Zionts, and Leon Zionts, for stopping by StoryBeat. This has just been a fantastic afternoon, and I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Great.
We can't wait to show you.
Yep.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.